Hi, I'm Christina and this is a book review of Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. So this is a contemporary fiction novel and it was published in 2024. So this is a story about three sisters and their fourth sister has sadly passed away around a year ago, and they are all really struggling with this devastating loss and they are all grieving. So let me tell you a little bit about the three sisters. So the eldest sister is called Avery and she is 33 years old. She lives in London with her wife, and her wife is 7 years older than her and she is 40 years old, and she is a therapist and Avery is a lawyer. So they have both done very well for themselves. You would say that kind of financially speaking and in terms of success, Avery has done the best out of all four of the sisters, and she's the eldest and she's very much the one that kind of looks after everybody at the expense of herself sometimes. But Avery's had some real difficulties in her past. She struggled with addiction for a long time. She became addicted to heroin and she was homeless for a long time and she lived on the streets, but then she went to rehab and she got herself clean and she went to law school and she has become a very successful lawyer. So there's a lot of darkness in her past and a lot of demons and struggles with addiction, and so she's very put together, but she also has a lot of difficulties under the surface that people don't always see. Then we have the second oldest sister and she is called Bonnie. She is 31 years old and she is a boxer. Now she is a professional boxer. She is at the very top of her game. She has been kind of a world champion in the women's side of boxing. She's very good at what she does, and it is her entire life. She has made it her entire world. Unfortunately, she suffered a devastating loss not long after the death of her sister, and she then moved to LA. She completely packed in the boxing and she's now a bouncer, and she's struggling quite a lot. They are all struggling, but she's struggling a lot. She's the one that found her sister dead and she's very much struggling to come to terms with that, as well as the loss of her sister. And then the second youngest sister was the one that passed away and she was called Nicole and she was known as Nicky. She was 27 years old when she died, and she was a primary school teacher, and she was quite different from the other girls. She kind of really had a lot of female friendships. She went to university, she was part of sorority. The sorority was a big part of her life, and that's kind of her personality. Obviously, we don't see as much from Nicky because obviously she's passed away. We see a perspective from all three of the sisters. We see all three of their perspectives as the story goes along. So you get to know each of them in turn and you get to see how they react to one another, and you see the sisters through their other two sisters' eyes, and you see the sister through her own eyes as well, which is really nice. It's really interesting to see. So you start the story and you see one of the sisters and then you watch the other two through her eyes, and then you go to the next perspective and you do the same again, etc. And then the very youngest sister is 26 years old and she is called Lucky, and she is a model. She is kind of a international professional model and she travels all around the world for this job, and she has been a model since she was about 15 years old. So she left school early and this has been something she's done for a long time, and she doesn't really have anywhere that you would call home because she has travelled so much. But she's also had a lot of difficulties and a lot of problems with alcohol, a lot of problems with drugs, lots of problems with addiction. This book in general has a lot of discussion on the topic of addiction with both drugs and alcohol, and it's a very large theme in this story actually. So yeah, Lucky is also struggling. She is struggling a lot with her drug and alcohol consumption, so much so that it is affecting her career in a large way. Essentially so much that she probably will start to lose her contract as a model. So yeah, those are our three sisters. And essentially they have drifted away quite a lot since Nicky has died, and they are each struggling with the death of her in their own way. And they aren't really connecting to one another. They aren't really connecting with one another. They're not really talking about their feelings. They're not really talking about their grief. They've kind of just disappeared from each other's life, possibly to nullify some of the pain. essentially they're all coming back together now because the apartment that was Nicky's belonged to their parents, and the parents have decided to sell the apartment now that it has been 1 year since she has died, because essentially the apartment is empty and nobody is living there, and they need the money essentially because they need it for their dad to go to rehab. He also has like addiction problems, so this is something that is kind of, an entire family has a lot of trouble with addiction. It's something that is with all of them essentially. So for the last year, the eldest sister Avery, the one who obviously has a very successful job as a lawyer, has a lot more of a disposable income, has been paying the mortgage on the property or the rent on the property, I can't remember which. So essentially this is why they've been kind of in a state of just kind of frozen in time, and there hasn't needed to be a big decision about what they're going to do with the house, the home where Nicky lived, or what are we going to do with her belongings and her clothes and everything she's left behind. That wasn't a decision that anyone needed to make straight away, because Avery just decided to pay for it, and out of sight, out of mind, nobody needed to worry about it. But now the parents have decided to sell, then obviously this is something they need to do. So essentially the three sisters are coming together to kind of see the place where Nicky lived and where Nicky died, and to try to sort through her belongings and decide what they want to keep and what they want to donate, what they want to throw away, etc. And obviously it's a very emotionally charged novel because all three of the sisters are grieving for their fourth sister in their own ways, and they are kind of lashing out at each other. And there's a lot of difficulties there. There's a lot of kind of old resentments. There really is an interesting look at kind of sibling dynamics and sister dynamics. And she spends a lot of time kind of exploring the relationship between these three women. And obviously their relationship, when there was four of them, was so very different. And they're all trying to come to terms with their loss of their fourth sister, and how they have always been like a unit of four. There has always been four girls, four siblings, always together. And obviously things have changed so much now. Nicky isn't there anymore, and the whole dynamic has shifted and changed, and none of them are used to it, and none of them really quite know what to do. And obviously because they haven't seen each other very much in the last year, I don't think they've really seen each other very much at all since the funeral. Maybe the kind of feeling that Nicky wasn't there wasn't as strong, because obviously they weren't all together. They hadn't seen her loss quite so amplified. So obviously when they're all back together again, the three of them, the fact that she is missing is so much more amplified. So yeah, it's really just a story about families, a story about sisters, a story about sibling relationships, a story about grief and death and loss and sorrow, and also the large theme of addiction, like I mentioned before, and just all of those things kind of put together. And I really, really enjoyed this book. I found it really interesting. I really liked all of the characters. Obviously we don't get to see Nicky so much because she's already passed away, but the three sisters, I really enjoyed reading about all of them. I found them very interesting. They are all very unique. They're definitely individuals, and they definitely read like different characters on the page. There isn't a time when you're reading someone's perspective and you can't remember whose perspective you're reading. They're very kind of individual people, and they all have their kind of weaknesses and their strengths. And yeah, I enjoyed reading about all of them. There's also some kind of difficult relationships between them and their parents. So their father wasn't very nice to the girls growing up, and could be essentially part of the problem about how a lot of them have struggled through their lives. He also struggled himself with addiction problems. He is an alcoholic, and that is something that has been very prominent in their childhood, especially their late childhood. And times when he was sober are kind of the best times of their life, the best times of their childhood, essentially. So his addiction problems and his issue with alcohol was a large part of their early to late childhood and adolescence and their adult life too. And their mother was probably a little distant, you would say, and probably always kind of put the father, her husband, before them. And there's even questions of the fact if she wasn't quite sure if she ever really wanted to be a mother, if she ever really wanted to have children, kind of more of a fact that she wanted to be a wife, but she wasn't ever really sure if she wanted to be a mother. Obviously she ended up with 4 children. I think their religion is Catholic, so she just kind of said it's, you know, if you wanted to be a mother, sorry, if you wanted to be a wife, you're most likely probably going to be a mother if that happens. So yeah, it's interesting. You see the dynamics as well between the three of them and between their parents. The father isn't really on the page so much, but the mother is on the page sometimes. And you also see a little bit more of her perspective later on. We never get her actual perspective, but we kind of see a little bit more from her. We also have some other big characters. Avery's wife is quite a large character. Lucky isn't really dating anyone as such, so there's no one really there for her. Bonnie has someone that she has kind of held a flame for years and years and years and is in love with, but has never really explored that or kind of voiced her feelings about that. So yeah, we see each of them in different stages of their relationships. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I have given it 5 stars. I found it very moving at times, very emotive. It really explores a lot of themes. And yeah, it's a really interesting book. I really liked it. It really is just a story about families and people and their relationships, and a large story about grief. And I generally quite enjoy stories that explore the themes of death and grief. And yeah, I think it was a really good book. I would highly recommend it. And like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I had a really good time reading it. It's very well written. I really enjoyed it. And I would definitely read more by this author again. So whatever she publishes next, I will definitely pick up. And I know her debut novel is Cleopatra and Frankenstein, which I haven't read, and I absolutely will read that. I really enjoyed this 5-star read. Would definitely recommend you reading it if you have, you know, if you think that sounds interesting to you. And if you have read it, I would love to know what you thought of it down in the comments below. If you've read her debut, I would love to know what you thought of it. Let me know. Do you think I'm going to enjoy it? Do you think I should kind of read it soon and prioritise it? So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know what you thought of this book, or if I have convinced you to read it, let me know that too, and then come back and tell me what you thought of it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please do like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me talking about books. I'll see you in my next one.